because Ulster Bank is due to begin freezing its first batch of customer accounts today as part of the bank's phased exit from the Irish market. The estimated 3,600 accounts were among the first to be given 6 months' notice to close last April, but have not yet done so. The bank says it believes the customers who own these particular accounts have low reliance on them or may have accounts elsewhere. According to figures from the Central Bank, just 38% of active accounts with Ulster Bank and KBC Bank Ireland have been closed so far, leaving a massive 770,000 accounts still open. Well, for more on this, we're joined now by John O'Connell, General Secretary of the Financial Services Union, and Celine Clark, who's Head of Advocacy and Public Affairs with Age Action. And you're both very welcome to the programme this afternoon. John, I might call for yourself. I might start with yourself first. And big figures here, really big figures. I mean, the Ulster Bank 3,600, not so much perhaps, but the amount of accounts still open really is quite something. You're calling for the Central Bank to intervene.
We are calling the Central Bank to intervene. At the very start of this massive project, which next to the euro changeover is the biggest project in financial services in over 2 decades. So from our point of view, we called at the very start for 3 things to make this a successful project: transparency, resources and adequate timelines. And it's the adequate timelines and the resources issue that we are being challenged on. The transparency is addressed by the Central Bank report, which gives us the information, eye-watering numbers in terms of the number of accounts and so forth. And we just can't see how those numbers can fit into a timeline between now and next March. So that's the timeline piece. And the resources, the receiving banks are still challenged in terms of resourcing properly. And we see that on a daily basis, where staff have to go from one branch to another at short notice to cover staff gaps in the system. So these issues should have been and could have been addressed. And that's why we're calling on the Central Bank to intervene and to set this project on a course for success. A lot of good work has been done on the project up to this point. 800 jobs have been saved, Sarah, in the decision of Ulster Bank and KBC to leave. 800 jobs have been saved so far. Steady progress was being made, but we are totally opposed for forced rebanking. It's alien to our culture in Ireland, and it's just a wrong thing to do with those numbers involved.
What are the banks to do, though, if we take these 3,600 accounts that are to be frozen, and the Ulster Bank is saying they were among the first to be given 6 months' notice to close last April? Is that not enough time, John, 6 months?
I don't think it is, frankly, but I think one of the problems was Ulster Bank broke early. They moved before any bank was in a position to be a receiving bank and properly staffed up to deal with that kind of inflow. And people are time poor, Sarah, and so you find yourself in a situation where you may have taken time off to go and do this. You discover that it's quite a complex operation to move all your accounts and standing orders and so forth. And people don't have time. But we know from the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission report that issued the other day that of the successful ones that managed the process, 60% of them had difficulties and significant difficulties. So we need to understand what are those difficulties and resolve those issues before we force people to rebank by freezing their money. This is people's own money. So I don't think it's a reasonable approach when we don't know what the reasons are that people find it difficult to make this transaction or transition from one bank to the other.
Okay, stay with us, Joe. I mentioned we also have Celine on the line from Age Action Ireland. What sort of response, Celine, are you seeing from older people who are customers of these banks leaving the market?
So in Age Action, what we're hearing from people who are struggling to make the switch is a number of things. One, digital exclusion. So for people who cannot do this online, there's a huge barrier for them to overcome, both in terms of being able to close the account, open a new account, and then move all their payments, their direct debits and their standing orders across. The other issue, of course, is that there's a lot of anxiety for people. They may have had this bank account for decades. It might be the only bank that they ever used, and now they have to figure out what's the new financial product that they can move to. And some people are finding that they're not being able to match the product and that they can't maybe get a an overdraft or a credit card in their new bank straight away, and they have to wait. And so that's slowing people down, and they're not moving as quickly as they might because they can't match the credit product. The other thing is a lot of people are just overwhelmed with the process, the number of steps, the paperwork. They're intimidated, particularly if they get a digital first message. For example, we had a client recently who was told they needed an email address to open an account with a credit union. They didn't have one, so they tried to enroll in one of our free digital literacy classes, which takes 10 weeks to complete once you get on it, just so they could get an email address that they would never use again, so they could open an account. So some people hear the digital first message and it intimidates them and they stop the process. Others then don't have the correct paperwork that they need, such as a utility bill with their current address because they live with somebody else or they're in residential care. Others are facing difficulties with valid forms of ID. So when they get their list of paperwork that they need for a new bank account, they say, I don't have it, and then maybe they go off and apply for a passport, or they just put the stuff in a drawer and hope that it goes away. Yeah. So we do know that, the Banking Payments Federation and a number of the receiving banks are making an effort to support what they call vulnerable customers, and they have dedicated vulnerable customer lines. Now, I know many older people won't identify as a vulnerable customer, but if they're struggling to make a decision and they need support due to diminished cognitive ability, or they're challenged to communicate with the bank for loss of hearing or some other need, or they're experiencing financial or other abuse and want to try and safeguard their money, or maybe they just have mobility issues, they can't get out, or they're worried about those key documents, they should make contact with the new financial institution that they want to move to and discuss it with them, and they will be able to help. Now, we do know that resources can be an issue in, getting the phone line answered.
Okay.
But we understand from the banks that these particular frontline on the vulnerable customer line are trained and will be able to support. Yeah.
Okay. You've identified so many different problems there, Celine, and challenges and hurdles that people might have to overcome to try and open a bank account. Just finally then, I assume that among those accounts that are going to be frozen by Ulster Bank, there will be some of those, who knows how many, will be older people who are frozen, with anxiety about how to move. What would you say to those people, or what would you say to Ulster Bank?
Well, we understand from Ulster Bank that if a customer has received a Department of Social Protection payment in the last 30 days, they won't be frozen at this time because they've identified a number of customers who have a reliance on those accounts. And to be fair, Age Action has engaged with the financial, both Ulster Bank and the receiving banks, and highlighted these various problems.
Okay.
But people still have to try and move. But ultimately what we need is a much more inclusive banking model in Ireland. People just need a basic bank account. This industry has a duty to provide that and to support people without a digital first message as well.
All right. Well, no doubt it's a topic we'll come back to, but thank you both very much for joining us. That's Celine Clark and John O'Connell. We'll take a break.